Hey everybody, it's Claire Moon. Welcome to another rising sign horoscope. This one is going to be about Saturn's ingress into Pisces, and Saturn will be spending a little over 2 years there in Pisces. It actually gets going on March 7th of 2023, and it's going to be in there until May 24th of 2025. So little shy of 2.5 years, but plenty of time to work on whatever this is going to be about. Now, just a couple notes before I dive in, bring the chart up. There are going to be a subset of people listening to this who might have Saturn in Pisces in your natal chart. So if that's you, if you have Saturn in Pisces natally in your birth chart, that means that this is going to be relevant to your Saturn return. And so while I'm not going to be addressing directly Saturn return in Pisces, just know that whatever I'm talking about with whatever rising sign, you can also definitely apply this to your rising sign, of course, but be thinking about this also in terms of your Saturn return. I will say a few words on that a little later before we get into each rising sign, but I just want to make that distinction that I'm not addressing that directly, but it's a Venn diagram, like it's all related. I think, is there any other announcements? I mean, if you're getting help from this video today, if you like what I'm putting down, if it feels helpful, definitely smash the like button, subscribe if you really, really like it and want to see more of it. That just helps me keep doing this. It helps me not have to go back to my day job. This is my day job now. I'm literally doing this job during the day. Okay, let's get this little chart up so you can see that. Hopefully you can see that now. And this is probably going to take, I don't know, this video is going to be kind of long. The intro is going to be somewhat involved. Please hang around for the introduction. I think it's going to give a lot of really important context. And I'm also going to be describing a few resources that I'm going to be linking below. I want to help people through this time. And so I want to provide some things that might help us just navigate these Piscean seas that we'll be going through. So definitely check that out below. But if you must, just skip ahead, find your rising sign, and I should be putting the chapters here somewhere at some point. Okay. And I am starting with Pisces. Poor little Pisces, you're always last, but we're going to start with you this time. I took everything else off. I just wanted us to really focus on Saturn here. And this is what Pisces looks like. All of these other people around here, I like the bounds terms in there. I've been using them more and more and more. So that's what those are. If you're not familiar with what that is, you can ignore that. It doesn't matter. And then also I do have Jupiter up here. Now, traditionally speaking, Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces. And when Saturn needs guidance, when Saturn is, sailing through these waters and they need support, they're going to be asking Jupiter for help. And it just so happens that we are very lucky that, the first 2 months of Saturn being in this sign, Jupiter is still going to be in Aries. But then what I think is super helpful is that Jupiter ends up in a nice sextile by sign with Saturn for this whole time, or not this whole time, but the first year. So from May 16th of 2023 until May of 2024, we're going to have Jupiter in a really great position to support Saturn. So I'm going to be bringing that into these horoscopes. And I did forget to mention, read these for your rising sign. Well, you can definitely also listen to these in terms of your sectile, like the sun or the moon. I'm going to be discussing really specific house topics, and that is not going to apply if you're just listening to this in terms of your sun sign. So just to be clear about that. And then, and I'm not going to get into this. I think I'm going to do a check-in a year into this Saturn and Pisces time, but then eventually Jupiter is going to move its way into Gemini. And then we're going to be getting a square aspect, but it'll still be some kind of support, we might have to make adjustments to access because squares usually need some kind of adjustment. But all in all, I was very thankful to see that Jupiter had some eyes on their sign of Pisces this whole time that Saturn is going to be in there. So I think that takes care of that. I'm going to do some reading just about Saturn and Pisces just to introduce that. I'm also going to speak on some spiritual things for a minute, a little later. So that's what the intro is going to be, just to get our sea legs. And I'm going to keep using these puns, by the way. I love puns. I love play on words. So, sorry, but we're doing that. And also apologies. I made the mistake of going outside without like the proper ski mask situation. It's like super cold today, and it really activated my airways. All my mucosal membranes are just like, what have you done? You put really cold air on us for an hour. So if I'm a little snarfy and need to like have my beverages, bear with me. This is why you don't live in the north. This is why you live in the south. Just throwing it out there. Okay. So first things first, actually a quote. Let's start with a quote. So I really love this quote from Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was this philosopher king person who was alive at the time when what we know as Western traditional astrology was really being developed as we know it today, as this 4-part system of houses, signs, planets, aspects. But Marcus Aurelius was talking about, now I'm going to define a word first because I had to look this word up like twice. It's the word promontory. Think about like the word prominent, like very easily seen. A promontory is anything that juts out into like a body of water or something like that. So I like to think of a promontory, like think about maybe a rugged coastline, like a cliff. Imagine that, like a really tall cliff of rocks against a coastline or something like that. That's our promontory. Now, Marcus Aurelius says, and this reminded me of Saturn and Pisces, be like the promontory against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and takes the fury of the water around it. That's going to be us. That's going to be us. And maybe if you have Saturn in your chart in Pisces as a baby, as natal, maybe this is what you're like already. And that can be a coin with two sides. Everything in astrology to me is a coin with two sides. It depends on how much we're doing it in this direction versus that direction. But Saturn wants to bring stability into Pisces. It wants to bring form into a place that generally doesn't have a lot of form, that generally does not have a lot of stability. And so this can be something kind of depending on the context of your life, depending on how we're coming into this period of time. We could use a little bit of structure. We could use a little bit of this firmness, this stalwartness to stand firm against all of the waves that are crashing around us, So I really liked that idea and that imagery. And now this is another quote. This is another one I really liked for this time. And this goes more towards Saturn really being a planet of limitations, realism. And this comes from Eunice Hung, who is someone who runs this. They have a podcast. They have an Instagram channel. It's called The Art of Dating NYC. Big recommend, whether you are in a relationship long-term, whether you're dating, it doesn't matter. It's gold. But Eunice Hung says, knowing your limits is wisdom. Saying enough is not the same as giving up. And I love that very much. Just this idea that sometimes we need to put things down, and that doesn't mean that you have totally forgotten it. It doesn't mean you can't return to it. It doesn't mean you have failed, but sometimes we need a break. Sometimes we need to acknowledge limits, and that's not a bad thing. That can actually be very liberating and very healthy. So I wanted to bring that up as well. As someone who is a fixed sign person myself, I tend to have kind of a hard time stopping and letting things go or setting things down. I think if you're a fixed sign person like Aquarius, Leo, Taurus, Scorpio rising, or if you have a lot of planets in those signs, we can get so obsessed with maintaining, so focused on just keeping going that we don't realize that that's not really how things work. Everything is subject to change. So there's that. Okay. And then I guess I'm going to get out. I'm going to not share for a second. I'm going to hold, please. Because I'm going to read some stuff out of some books here. Okay, let's read out of books together. Okay. This one This is Valens Anthology as translated by Mark T. Riley. And let's just read a little bit about Saturn, and then let's read a little bit about Pisces. So Saturn. And now this, okay, just as a warning, this language, it's ancient people. They talk different than we do now. They're not as, I don't think they were they were not as sensitive as we are now, I don't think. So just keep that in mind. I'm not calling anyone any names. All right. I am Saturn-tastic. I'm ruled by Saturn. So, I guess I'm probably talking about myself. All right. So Saturn makes those born under him petty, malignant, careworn, self-deprecating, solitary, deceitful, secretive in their trickery, strict, downcast. Oh, and I'm going to go back too, because careworn, I looked that one up. I was like, what in the hell is careworn? And careworn means someone who is like exhausted with worry. So Saturn, and then petty. I also looked petty up because I think we think about the word petty in terms of like, I don't know, just kind of being focused on little things that maybe don't matter. And I think what that really comes down to for me personally is critical, hypercritical, or just like appropriate amount of critical. It's not good or bad to be critical, but depending on the severity of it and where we're pointing that thing, it can get a little harsh, right? So anyway, Valens is saying downcast. And I don't know if I said this is from Valens. Squalid, black-clad, importunate, sad-looking, miserable, with a nautical bent. Ooh, yes. See, that's why we're doing all of I mean, not just because of Pisces, we're doing the water puns, and the ocean puns, but Saturn itself has a nautical bent. Plying waterside trades. Saturn also causes humblings, sluggishness, unemployment, obstacles in business, interminable lawsuits. Subversion in business, and imprisonment, chains, grief, accusations, tears, bereavement, capture, and the exposures of children. What a delight. Sounds very fun at parties, right? Okay. And then, yeah, I think that's all I have to say from that chapter. And then if we look at Valens in terms of Pisces, I'll come over here. So Pisces, they say moist many times, which I thought was funny. So Pisces is the celestial sign, which is feminine, moist, quite wet, bicorporal, meaning two bodies, with many offspring, mossy, scaly, sinewy, humpbacked, leprous, two-formed, mute, motile, with rough skin, in conflict with itself because one fish is northern, the other southern. It is moist, downward trending, servile, changeable, since saying some of the same stuff. The cause of wandering, varied. Men born under this sign are unsteady, unreliable, changing from bad fortune to good, sexy, thievish, shameless, prolific, and popular. I'll take it, I'm a Pisces moon. Ooh, cool and breezy. And then they go on to talk about a bunch of astronomical stuff. So, and then this is actually from Demetra George's book, Volume 1, Ancient Astrology. And there are some things here. And this is more about physical appearance. And this comes from Tusser. I think it's like Tusser of Babylon or something. Pale complexion, nice hair, ingenious, hard drinkers, and spendthrifts. And spendthrift, I also had to look up that word. That means like someone who is just spending frivolously without much responsibility. Let's see. And then this comes from, there's a parentheses that says mostly Valens. So I'm not sure where the rest of this came from, but again, with Pisces, inconsistent, of two minds, changing from good to bad, erotic, servile, popular, sociable, restless, complicated, cause of wandering. So we heard some of those before too. So we're getting a feel, right? And you can get a feel just from all of these words I just read about how different these things are. Saturn has a very different vibe to it than what we just heard about Pisces. So we can imagine, like, say you're in Aquarius rising, and we know that Saturn is much more conservative, much more critical. And it's coming into this place in the Aquarian second house of Pisces, where the money in the bank account is, and maybe usually we're spending frivolously. And Saturn comes in and says, hey, what's going on here? So that's just like a very real example of what might be going on. But we'll get to that when we do Aquarius rising last, because Pisces is going first. Okay. And then, just my own 2 cents, my own 2 brain cells on the topic. These are some words that I have just in my own studies and putting together what I've learned from all of my teachers over the years. And like some of these come straight from what we just read, right? But when we think of Saturn, I do think of form, structure, boundaries, borders, order, systems, constriction, limitation, the reaching of limits, delays, barriers, authority. Did we say that? Because there was something about managers. Hold up. No, I didn't. So with Saturn, okay, also in this book by Valens, Saturn also is about, where did it go? It puts into one's hands great ranks and distinguished positions, supervisions, supervisors, management of others' property. Yeah. So we get management, we get people in authority, so that's kind of where that comes from, I believe. So when I think of like responsibility, accountability, Saturn, honestly, it's pretty unerotic. It's kind of the opposite of Pisces in that way. We do not get things that are very erotic. Loss, death. We think about winter in the northern hemisphere with Saturn ruling over Capricorn and Aquarius, which symbolize in the northern hemisphere this time of year when we have the least light, we have the least warmth. Things are not growing; they are hibernating or dying. So definitely loss, death. We get isolation, solitude. Bringing in Saturn, the joy of the 12th house. So that is. The 12th house is where we go to be alone or where we feel alone. Duty, obligation, hard work, delayed gratification. We get doubt. I really love thinking about Saturn in terms of doubt. Maybe love is the wrong word, but when we think about, Valens said Saturn having a critical air, hypercritical in my terms, kind of like too much, but sometimes. But we also get doubt, and doubt can be a really useful function. I think we think of doubt always in this negative sense, but doubt is a good thing depending on what you're dealing with. Having a healthy amount of doubt to be like, oh wait, maybe I don't know that, or maybe this isn't how I'm perceiving it to be. Then we can go and do a second check, do a double check on that, or go investigate more, and then come back and make a better decision or order things in a more efficient way or something like that. So doubt is not a bad thing, but certainly Saturn can come in and cause some doubt. We also get the word no, saying no to stuff, reaching our limit. And, before we had Pluto being the Lord of control and things that might have control over us, we had Saturn. I think Saturn speaks to having control. Think about, putting a border around something. You're trying to control whatever that is. And so it's going to be interesting having Saturn go into Pisces, which is this kind of boundless, borderless water sign that really it's boundless. And having Saturn coming in there trying to control it. We'll see how it goes. Like, it's going to be pretty interesting. And I don't really know what to expect with that. So that's definitely in the wait and see pile of things. So we also get reality with Saturn, realism, and disillusionment. That's another one where, like doubt, we think of disillusionment in this really negative way. And honestly, like, it's not a bad thing. Depending on what we're doing, like fantasy, illusion, imagination, super purposeful. It has its place. How dull and sad would life be if we didn't have those things, especially if you're an artist? Like, And we'll get to that with Pisces. But disillusionment comes in handy when the illusion is gone. We see what's really there. So that's an important function of Saturn. And then just thinking about Saturn ruling a cardinal sign and a fixed sign, Capricorn and Aquarius. It has its exaltation in Libra, another cardinal sign. Triplicity, ruler of air. We've got it ruling over air and earth, versus Pisces, who is a mutable sign, a water sign. Very, very different. Okay, and then with Pisces, now here's some other words just having to do with what I've learned over Pisces over the years. We've got formlessness, shapeless, ephemeral, ineffable, not having words to describe it sometimes. Mercury is in its fall and detriment there. So it's not its fave. And Mercury being of words, it's like in this place that defies words sometimes. Pisces being about faith, hope, ruled by Jupiter, more subtle truths, seeking of understanding, spirituality, like I was mentioning, lack of boundaries, dissolution into the collective, illusion, delusion, fantasy, imagination, vision, creativity, the erotic, inclusivity, acceptance, which is kind of the opposite of trying to control things, pleasure, comfort, artistry. And then the last thing I'll say about it too is just, Pisces being a nocturnal feminine sign. What was really interesting, I heard this in a lecture about Jupiter being a malefic functionally, like just how Jupiter is, how it's possible that it might act as a malefic in some charts. And in that lecture, Robert Hand talked about just the nighttime signs, the nocturnal signs, having this boundlessness, having this nature that isn't held in by these daytime rules where Saturn and Jupiter, kind of the enforcement of the law in the daytime realm. In the nighttime realm, we don't have that. So again, this person who's trying to come in, put form and structure to something that by itself is pretty all over the place. So I thought that was interesting. Okay, shifting gears. Let me take a little sippy sip here. Need my 18 beverages. I have a Pisces moon, so take that in mind. Hopefully I'm not projecting too much. I think if you have any kind of personal visible planet, any of those in Pisces, this might speak to you a little more. If you don't have signs or any planets or points in the sign of Pisces, this next part might not speak to you as much. But I want to talk about equanimity and the concept of being balanced in a place that can be very changeable. And the next concept, it hits me as something that feels very Saturn in Pisces. But it also feels like a practice we can do that might help us while Saturn is in Pisces. And I use the word practice on purpose because this shit is difficult. And I come at this from being a small teacher, as Ajahn Chah says. Like, as much as I'm talking the talk here, I really struggle walking the walk with this. And I think some of you might also relate to that. So I'm going to read a little bit from this book, Mindfulness by Joseph Goldstein, A Practical Guide to Awakening. It's a guide. Yeah, we haven't done it, but we can try. So this first one, this is just a little thing. And this kind of feels like what might be happening when Saturn comes into Pisces. And maybe those who have Saturn in Pisces natally, maybe you're already kind of like this. I don't know. I'm not sure. But Joseph Goldstein says, sometimes the simple act of clear recognition is enough to come to a place of acceptance and letting go. So I think clear recognition, Saturn, and then acceptance and letting go, Pisces. Instead of being tossed about in a storm of undifferentiated emotions, we can begin to discern whether our emotion is fear or loneliness, boredom or unhappiness. It is the way of acknowledging, yes, this is what's here. So that's felt very Saturn and Pisces to me. How do we be realistic so that we can accept what the hell is going on, so that we can move forward in a way that actually makes sense instead of treading water, another pun, instead of not making any ground or just spinning our tires, like that's not a fun way to live. And I think sometimes we avoid reality, we avoid our limits because it's sad and it sucks. But there is like a potential silver lining on the other side of that, right? So there was that. And then on equanimity in particular, so in the Pali language, which is a language that more of like the regular folks used in northern India when the time of a lot of these Buddhist teachings were being propagated, in Pali, the word is upekkha. And upekkha is generally translated to this word equanimity in English. And equanimity is this idea of having a balanced state of mind in the face of things that might throw you off. Literally, like Marcus Aurelius saying, the promontory against which the waves are breaking, being that firm, balanced, open energy in what is otherwise a very changeable place. And Joseph talks about equanimity in terms of there's a couple things in this book, one being about balance, so very much these vicissitudes of life of, when we have pain or pleasure, when our preferences are being met versus when they're not being met, when we have praise versus blame, when people are being nice to us versus not nice to us, and then the other one was like fame versus disrepute, which feels a lot like praise versus blame. And being not letting these things affect us so much. So it's not, equanimity is sometimes misunderstood as something where we don't feel anything or we become like, dead to the world, like this neutrality of like, pushing away any reactions to anything. And that's not it. Like, good luck trying. If you figure out how, if you become like an arhat or something and like a Zen Buddhist master, like, yeah, you can let me know. But for most of us here down on earth, like, yeah, we're still going to get caught up in these things. We're going to have feelings and reactions and thoughts in response to feeling good, not feeling good, basically. So how do we not let that affect us in our behaviors? How do we stay grounded and balanced? Well, things are very changeable and honestly very fickle, like Pisces. So one of the things is, just that balance. What was there anything else with this? Yeah, I think that was pretty much all I had to say about that. And a lot of it is just a practice. It's just noticing when we're getting caught up in that. Like, are we getting hooked by these feelings? If I'm getting a bunch of likes on a post, that was the other thing I wanted to talk about, was this in relation to social media, especially if you've got Pisces in the 9th, 10th, 11th house, and Saturn is going to be coming into those places, changing those areas of life. So what would that be? Let me look. That would be like if you had, what rising sign would that be? I have to like tilt my head. If you're like a Taurus rising or a Gemini rising or a Cancer rising, and you're having changes in like the public area of your chart or something, that would be one example. But these vicissitudes, these ups and downs can happen literally anywhere in life. But I think with social media, it's such an apparent example of like people who, maybe feel a bit more strongly with how many likes they're getting on a post or not. Or maybe you're getting a lot of positive feedback online and then all of a sudden you're not. Or maybe you're trying to share some art, maybe you're publishing a blog, maybe you're publishing your writings or your art, and maybe you don't get a positive response to something that you create and share with your groups or with your world. That can be really difficult, and it can start to hold us back from creating. It can hold us back from sharing ourselves with the world in a way that could help people or inspire people. And so I think equanimity comes in really handy when you are a creative person or when you're sharing on social media, such that we don't let these things affect us so profoundly that it holds us back in some way. So I wanted to just put that into your mind of thinking about that, because yeah, it's really hard for some of us, and it makes sense too, because like social media is wild. I mean, think about like just getting like 15 likes on something, and can you imagine like 15 people in a room all clapping for something that you did, or like 40 or 100? Like, that's crazy. And we don't even think about that as being wild. We were just like, oh yeah, I got 100 likes. It's like, can you imagine 100 people being like, yeah, you're the best? Like, that would be fantastic. And this is not something humans have dealt with. Like, most of us have lived a life for like eons where we're around like the same 20 people, and we're not public, we're not sharing in this way, most people. So this idea that we're being exposed so much is like not normal. It's like not. So again, all the more reason why I think this practice of trying to stay open, balanced, peaceful in the face of all of this while Saturn is in Pisces is could be really, really helpful for us. The other way I wanted to say, and then I'm going to move on from this, is equanimity as a divine abode. That's another English translation, but speaking of 4 mind states, one being loving kindness, another being compassion, and another being taking joy in the pleasure, happiness, success of others, being happy for other people, and equanimity fitting right into that. Equanimity, feeling balanced about stuff, about others, makes it a lot easier to be compassionate, to be kind to others. And it works the other way too. When we're kind, compassionate, loving toward others, it helps keep us in more of a balanced frame of mind. It's all intertwined with each other. So, and when we think of Pisces, that's where a lot of this stuff happens. That's what made me think of it, was that Pisces itself is a place of acceptance, compassion, love, all of these things, connection with pretty much everybody, everyone we can, hopefully with healthy boundaries. So I think that was it. I'm going to link some things below on these topics, on Ubeka, I'm also going to link Dr. Tara Brach, who they have this framework for processing emotions, basically, that I think is going to be helpful for all of us, especially those who've got a Pisces moon. This is going to be helpful. And maybe for people who have Saturn in Pisces natally, depending on what you have going on in the Pisces area of your chart. If Saturn is there, Saturn can be pretty rational, not really one to give a shit about feelings very much. And so if you are one that tends to internalize or intellectualize your emotions, this is a really good resource for you from Dr. Tara Brach, who adapted it's called the RAIN method, RAIN. And this was adapted from someone else named Michelle McDonald, who made it a little earlier, but I'm going to link that below. I'm not going to explain it here, but it's basically a way to move through emotional states in a way that is really nourishing and nurturing and helpful. And yeah, it's something that I don't think gets talked about enough. Okay. So the last thing I want to talk about here is just the decans of Pisces. I'm going to bring the chart back up, because this just gives us even a little bit more fine detail in regards to Pisces as a zodiac sign. So I'm going to get rid of the terms and bounds, because that's just going to be confusing. Hold, please. Okay. So, and I think the only wheel they have on Astro Gold here, they have the decanic rulers that I don't like. I'm not going to use those. That's why I'm not using those, is because I like to not use the outer planets in my decanic rulerships. But each decan is a 10-degree chunk of a sign, and it has a planetary ruler, and it gives us just another fine layer of detail when it comes to the sign, and it helps describe it a little bit more. So this first decan, and there's even within this, there's like, we already saw one of the more of like a modern rulership scheme, but there's 2 others. I like to use the Chaldean descending order one, so that's the one I'm going to be using. But this first portion is ruled by Saturn, actually. The second one's ruled by Jupiter. And then what is the next one? Mars. So we're going to talk about each of those really quick here, and then we'll finally get into these rising signs. So thanks for hanging in there if you're hanging in there. Hopefully this has been useful. So this first decan, ruled by Saturn, Saturn is going to be in there. So that gives Saturn a little bit of help. honestly, just a little bit. And what I really like about this, so this comes from Austin Coppock's work on the 36 decans. I took the NORWAC lecture workshop on this. It's a 6-hour long lecture, and I re-listened to it for the third time. And that was a re-listen. So it's the fourth time I've listened to it. I can't wait till the book comes out and I can try to like punch people in the face to try to get it. I just, PS, intel from the community. I was just listening to the Rune Soup. Austin Coppock usually does like a first half of the year, second half of the year forecast with Gordon. And he mentioned that I think it was like sometime late summer that it could be coming out again. So cross our fingers. But anyway, I just want to cite him and where I'm getting this information. But anyway, the first decan ruled by Saturn. And these were some of the things that were said. So invisible structures or hidden structures, like a labyrinth, invisible guidelines. And when we go into this place, it's kind of like, where did this structure come from? How did this get here? And how can I change it? Understanding your own behaviors as they relate to others. He described it really beautifully as a palace beneath the waves, many treasures there, but confusion along the way. And what I thought of, these underlying structures that might be hidden, that kind of control and influence how this part of our chart operates. When Saturn comes in, it's going to be a really good time to criticize this in a healthy way, to take stock, to take inventory, to audit what the hell is happening in here. And this example I thought of, I was in yin yoga the other week thinking about this. This came up in my mind because my teacher in yin yoga, he was describing how yin yoga is really meant not to stretch the muscles as much as it is to stretch the fascia. And fascia, I think that's how you pronounce it. Fascia, vase, vase, I don't know. But fascia is like this really kind of rigid, tough tissue that makes these it separates the muscle groups, and it's like a network of tissue that forms a structure kind of in between and around our muscles, and it's not very stretchy. And so the way that, we usually think about stretching muscles, we do like active flexibility training where we're really using those muscles. We're very active and fiery, and it's very yang, and then we stretch them, and it's can be very, I don't know, kind of abrupt and harsh sometimes, depending on how you're doing it. But when you're in yin yoga and you're trying to stretch and change this underlying network of fascia in our body, the way to do that is very slowly, very carefully, and then holding that position for a really long time. And I was like, oh yeah, this feels like Saturn going through Pisces. So I think the approach is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not to do, which we'll talk about with the last decan. I don't think it's like, oh, Saturn is going to get into Pisces and it's just going to like slap you and be like, change it, even if something really abrupt happens, like let's say you have planets or points in that first decan of Pisces. I think the move is to gently, slowly feel into this area of our chart, take stock of some things, and just hang out with it for a while, And then what happens is in that yin yoga pose, what you do is you kind of push your edge of discomfort, there might be a little bit of discomfort, and then you kind of sit with that and then see if you can go a little further. And then you sit with that and you see if you can go a little bit further. And I think that's honestly that's the approach I'm going to take. That's what I'm probably going to be recommending to all my clients is not any big, broad, quick sweeping changes. We've got 2.5 years of Saturn being in here. So think of this as a restructuring of, or kind of I shouldn't say a restructuring, but trying to just amend or adapt what is happening in this area of our life. Okay. And then the second decan here. Now, this is straight up ruled by Jupiter. And what Austin Coppock talks about here is the coming together of our internal and our external worlds in a way. So, he had mentioned our internal desires, hopes, dreams, and what it feels like when our outer world does not align with that. Not very good. Very reversed 9 of Cups energy. versus how good it feels when our outer world really aligns with what we would hope for on the inside of ourselves. And so at that point, once we've figured out the underlying structures of things, how everything is working in Pisces for us or not working, then we can really take stock of, where are the mismatches? Where is the incongruency? And what are the steps that I can actually take to change it? And we can start to dream and vision and try to think of a plan at that point. I'm going to link below another little helpful tidbit. There's someone named Roshi Joanne Halifax, she's a spiritual teacher. I believe she's in the Zen Buddhism tradition, but I credit getting this. The first person who shared this with me was my first astrologer, Adam Summer of the Holes to Heavens podcast. He was my first astrologer. Thank Fluff, like basically saved me from the depths. But he told me about this article and I read it. So I'm going to link it below. It's a short article, but it's about wise hope. And this idea, I think for some of us who aren't very faith oriented, it's like, I do not have any faith. I would like to see evidence right now of this thing. Faith is not my language. If that's you, if you have a hard time trust falling with the universe, this is definitely for you. But wise hope is this idea, and I'm going to butcher it, so please read it, but I'm going to do my best to paraphrase really quickly. It's just like we have pessimism and we have optimism. And both of those sides are pathways to apathy and inaction. Basically, it's like, oh, shit's not going to work out, so fuck it. Oh, it's going to be amazing, so I don't need to do anything. But what if we could find a middle ground where we're like, well, I don't know if it's going to work out. I don't know how it's going to work out. But while I'm here, I might as well do something. While I'm here, I might as well try to, affect change on it in a positive way. So I really liked that for this decan as well. And then finally, we get this last portion, which is no matter if you're using the triplicity rulership scheme for the decans or the Chaldean order one, it's Mars. It's Mars all the way. And this is action. We're taking action after all of this time, very action oriented with Mars. And I like, from Jason Hawley's work, I will also link it below, talking about Pisces in his work of, having this myth of the Typhon, this huge, crazy creature with like 1 billion heads, and it would just like lay waste to the lands. And that is something that can happen in this part of Pisces. This is literally throwing the baby out with the bathwater. This is all fucked. I'm going to destroy it all. This is, I'm just going to start over. If you are a nerd and you ever played Magic the Gathering, Magic the Get-Togethering, love that game. I'm like sharing how big of a nerd I can be. You have these cards that are like board sweepers where it just takes everybody's creatures off the board. And that's one way of looking at this area. So we need to approach it with caution. Like, we don't have to do that. It's like, if we did all this work, like maybe there are parts of it that we can preserve or use in the structures that we're building here. The other part of this decan is this means of maybe devotion or really going all in with something. There's an intensity to this area, with Mars being a ruler, sacrifice, martyrdom, and we need to be careful what we are devoting to, what we're committing to. Saturn is commitment as well. So, be really mindful about this time, this 2.5 years. What are we committing to? What are we devoting ourselves to? And does it align with what we really care about? I think those are going to be important things to think about. Okay. Decans part concluded. So here are some major themes that I want us all to be thinking about. And I'm going to be saying these over and over and over again. But whatever structures we are making, I think it's going to be important to make them flexible. So last little imagery thing to think about as we're going through these rising sign horoscopes is think about a bridge in the ocean. They think about even like, maybe this is a more, something more accessible, but if you've been on an airplane, you know how the wing will move a little bit. I didn't know that the first time I got on an airplane, and it scared the shit out of me. And I'm so embarrassed. This is like totally not relevant, but I asked the flight attendant if that was normal, because I was like, why is the wing moving? We're gonna die. Like, this is what happens when you don't end up on an airplane until you're in your mid-20s. I was a late bloomer. But anyway, that's on purpose. That's by design. And it's so that we can take the changing elements, right? Pisces is super changeable. So whatever structures we are building, rebuilding, deconstructing, constructing, we want to have some built-in flexibility. I'm especially talking to you, Libra rising, because in the sixth house, in your daily routines, your daily maintenance of your life, Pisces doesn't want to have a rigid linear structure. So build in some flexibility, right? Be kind to yourself, be flexible. But Bridge in the Ocean, same deal. They're making these structures with built-in flexibility so that, if you make it too rigid, it will break, right? So we don't want that. But okay, here are the themes. So Saturn going into Pisces, delays and challenges. For Saturn return, this goes for you too. Hard work, delayed gratification, commitment, reaching limits, having to say no, having to deal with more structure or restriction, maybe by choice, maybe we want more structure, or maybe that structure is being imposed externally and we have to deal with it. Like I was mentioning, creating structure, keeping it flexible, taking responsibility or accountability for that area of life, and then disillusionment. So remember what we were saying about seeing things clearly, seeing the reality of it. And yes, very disappointing. So disappoint. However, it is what needs to happen to move forward. Beep, beep, boop. Okay. I think with that, I'm ready. I'm going to pause this for just a second. But yeah, we're doing the rising signs. This is what timestamp is it? This is about 50 minutes in. Okay, we're back. I had to take a little breaky break. Had to have some orange juice so I didn't die. Honestly, maybe this is a Pisces moon thing, but like orange juice is so good it shouldn't even be legal. Like, how is it so good? I don't know. But anyway, and a note too. So Saturn return babies. Again, those themes that I just mentioned, just extra for if you are having a Saturn return, this is basically the fruiting of a 27, 30-year story for you. And I feel like when the Saturn return happens, you do get a bit of an audit. It's like, hey, here's the life you've built. Do you like it? If you do, cool, level up. If you don't, it's time to start doing the hard work of changing it, right? So that's a good thing to consider too. Whenever Saturn enters a place, it really depends on the context within which we are entering that period of time. So for instance, Saturn being so much about accountability and responsibility sometimes, or duty and burden. Are we prepared for that? And right now it's December 18th. We've got a good 3 months to prepare. It's like, so for instance, another personal example, but that's just the easiest for me because it's me, right? I'm an Aquarius rising. So Pisces is Pisces is in my second house. Saturn is coming into my second house. If I know that I'm going to have to be more responsible with money, maybe there's going to be burden or, challenges with my second house and money. Guess what I'm going to start doing now? Saving money just in case, right? So we prepare for these things. If you're a Libra rising and you've got Saturn coming into your sixth house of health and wellness, disease and recovery from disease, if you already know some things that you could be doing for your health, but you just haven't been taking responsibility for that for whatever reason. And granted, it can be a billion things. This is just one example. So this might not be for you, but, might not be a bad time to start thinking about what you could be doing for your health, right? And I think the more we can prepare for this, we won't get caught unawares, right? So I like to put that note in there, but yeah, Saturn return people, all of these themes might just be that more apparent for you in the house that is going to be relevant. Okay. So again, I'm not directly talking about Saturn return today, but it's relevant. Okay. Pisces rising. It's your time to go first. It's your time to shine. You've waited long enough. And we're going to have Jupiter for most of this first year in your third house. So that's where we're going to be looking for maybe some guidance or some support here during this time. So for Pisces rising, my notes here, I'm going to be looking at my notes a lot because there's a lot of notes. What things are changing in terms of your identity? The first house is your mind, body, spirit. It is you. It's your identity. It's who you are. And what tides are changing in terms of your identity or roles? What parts of your identity feel like they're being pulled away? And maybe we can let them go, you know? What underlies how you think about yourself? What things are influencing how you present yourself? You know, we talk about the first house really representing our first impression when someone meets us, when we present. You know, the first house was the place that's where planets are rising over the horizon. They're making their presentation. And so that is our presentation, right? So what things affect that? Saturn in the first can be difficult sometimes in terms of feeling like we're getting a little bit older. You know, again, like I'm getting done with Saturn in my first house, and I will tell you, I have gotten my first white hairs. I need bifocals. Like it is no joke. My body hurts when it rains. So just knowing if you do come into, it's mind, body, and spirit in the first house. If there are some physical manifestations of this, of feeling slower, feeling like maybe a little less vital, a little less bright and shiny, just know that this is a temporary transit. This is 2.5 years. You can get through it, do your best. And, with that limit piece, we might have to say that, yeah, I can't do as much maybe as I'm used to, or I need to ask for help to get done as much as I usually do. So keeping that in mind, might be taking responsibility for yourself, for the life you're crafting, first house being just general circumstances as well. If your outer circumstances do not match what you would like, and granted, I know things sometimes are out of our control, but with the things that are within your control, it might be Saturn saying, hey, make it happen. You do it. Let's see. Basically in that circumstances note too, like if there are things in your life that are really going well, how can we solidify and fortify those things? If there are roles that you are taking on that you're really enjoying, do you want to commit to them, right? Versus things that you don't like, things where you are reaching your limit, saying no to those things. And that can be really hard for us. I think especially, with Pisces, we want to, it's a Jupiter ruled place. Jupiter is yes. Saturn is no. So it's like Saturn, no, is coming into a rising sign that very much is like, yes. So just making sure that we're saying no to things so that we can say yes to the right things, or the things that we want to say yes to a little later, maybe when Saturn leaves. Oh yeah, authority and identity. So at this point, and this goes for Saturn returning to itself, Saturn return, stepping into authority or stepping into your experience when it comes to who you are, like being like, yes, this is who I am. I have these experiences. I have this mastery of this skill. And now I'm actually going to step into this position of authority. Remember, Saturn is the supervisor, the manager. You could be taking on responsibility in terms of taking on these roles where you are the authority person. So that could be a thing. Saturn in the first, speaking to self-respect, straight up. Disillusionment with general circumstances in life, disillusionment with what is around you. And with that acceptance that can come with that, then creating a life that does feel a little bit better. And then when it comes to those limits too, again, just kind of reiterating something I already said in the intro, sometimes when we reach a limit, we're scared to stop or we're scared to put it down because we feel like we can't go back to it, or we are setting it down forever. And I really just don't believe that always has to be the case. So I like to imagine There's this visual I like to imagine with this. I actually get this from someone named Jess Schaefer, who I heard say this like a decade ago, but she was doing a meditation and she recommended that we imagine putting something in a basket. So like if I've got something, I'm like, I don't want to do this shit anymore. What is this? This is not working for me. I'm going to imagine putting that thing or that person or that place or that role in a little basket and then setting the basket down. And it's still there, right? So just imagine it that way. And then we can think like, okay, maybe once I've rested, or maybe once, Saturn gets off my shit, I can pick this basket right back up. So in that, I think that can help us let go. And then maybe you'll decide, oh, wow, it feels so much better with that thing being down there in that basket. And you might decide never to pick it up again. And that's okay too. But that is still open to you. So I like to say that because I think we get some mental gymnastics that can happen, not to our benefit with that. And then the last thing, just being kind to yourself, especially in the first house. Saturn can be so hypercritical to the self, in that realism, that can be really difficult. So really accompanying these practices of finding your limits, saying no, all of those things with compassion, with self-kindness. So we can just have a balance there, because if we're constantly seeing the faults in everything, if in ourselves, especially, yeah, that's after 2 years, like you're going to be exhausted. So definitely want to bring in some really intentional compassion for the self. And then finally, when we're looking at Jupiter being down here in the 3rd house, this is somewhere we can look for support. So, and when we want help, maybe if we are reaching our limits, what about these 3rd house people? Our siblings, our extended relatives, our neighbors, people that we talk to regularly. So when you go to work every day, the people that you see in the office or whatever, these are all people that you can get help from. Jupiter is opportunity, it's growth, it's expansion. And so all of those people might be more than willing to help you in whatever you need. Also learning new things, the 3rd house of foundational learning. Maybe there's something you're learning, a new skill you're developing that can help you in some way, or help you create the life that you would like. Rituals, our regular daily, weekly, or monthly rituals that we do, those can be really supportive during this time. So if you're not a spiritual person, if you're a little bit more secular, these could be things like, for instance, like I do my pour over coffee every morning and talk to my plants and tell them they're beautiful and amazing. And I nurture them and care for them. Like these types of really heart-filling, rejuvenating rituals, that is a 3rd house thing. And then communication, like literally just telling people what's going on, talking to your people, making sure that there's a line of communication there so that you can get support if you need it. And then just your local spaces, your familiar spaces, maybe there are local teachers, local spiritual folks. We think about Jupiter being like a mentor, a teacher, a spiritual person. Maybe there's someone nearby in your local area that can be of service. So I think that is all I have to say for Pisces. So good luck, little watery, fishy friends. I think you're going to be just fine. And then we got Aries. So we've got Saturn up here in your 12th house. And we're going to have Jupiter in your 2nd. So with this, now this is an especially, like, if you didn't listen to the intro, I had mentioned a resource from Dr. Tara Brach that is linked below. This is especially for Aries rising because the 12th house is a place of our internal landscape. It is hard to pin down sometimes. We don't always know what's in there. We just kind of, if we have like feelings or experiences or thoughts that we aren't always dealing with, they kind of get shoved into the 12th sometimes. So I like to think of it as well, the 12th house, like our neural pathways a little bit, certain neural pathways or ways of thinking. Maybe we are prone to thinking about the worst possible case scenario. That is a neural pathway that can get very well rutted in. If you think of like cross-country ski tracks, they're just like really in there, like ruts and really like hard soil. And changing them is very difficult. So some questions that I have for Aries rising are, what underlies how you think about yourself, how you talk to yourself in your mind. Is there a way that is not helping you? And can we change it and restructure it during this 2.5-year span of time? Can we bring more attention to the internal world? Is there any mental health, emotional health, spiritual health practices that can bring some structure, some support to this area? Are we able to roll with the sensory information that is coming in? You know, so much about Pisces, that water is sensing the world around us. And with a lack of boundaries, sometimes there can be a lot of things that are being sensed. So are we able to process that? And when Saturn comes through, you know, I think sometimes when Saturn comes through the 12th, things can start to become a challenge. And especially in the 12th, we can be like, wow, I'm really struggling with this thing and I don't understand why. Like, where is this coming from? Why the hell is this a problem? And it's because it's like, it's in your blind spot. It's in the 12th. So, you know, you might have to do the 12th house thing. Spend some time alone. Spend some time in solitude, isolation. If you have the funds, you know, Jupiter in the second, bringing growth with your money maybe, or opportunities like financially, can you take a retreat? Can you go on a vacation, not with distraction, but some kind of retreat, even if it's like a home retreat, even if it's just like you in your home, taking some time off work, taking some time off of that 6th house, you know, in the opposite space. It's all of like the hustle and bustle and daily busyness. And the 12th, we move away from that. So is there some of that you can do to try to get in touch with your internal landscape and what needs to be reformulated there? Now, this is less psychobabbly, but there can also be just a lot of behind the scenes work. You know, Saturn can be effort over a long period of time. It can be really starting a big new structure of some kind in your life. And it might be done in private where no one can see. So it could just be a lot of behind the scenes work, projects that no one really knows about that you're not sharing. And then finally, with the 12th house, we have the topic of frenemies, enemies. Sorry, but I have to say it. The 12th house can be enemies sometimes, or just people you don't get along with, right? That's how Chris Brennan always phrases it, which I really, really like. It's just people you don't get along with. So that can be a challenge. And that equanimity might come in real handy about now if you've got people that are pissing you off, you know, not letting it rock your boat too much. It'll rock your boat internally, but that doesn't mean you have to act on stuff. That doesn't mean you have to, you know, let it influence your concept of self or anything like that, right? And then as far as Taurus being help from the second, what help can we get? You know, there might be opportunities in your second house, and very plainly money, you know, finances, but also we can think about getting your needs met in the second house. A little bit more abstract or modern type of definition for the second house is, what do I need? And maybe I have more of an opportunity than ever to get my needs met. And perhaps that's why there's a challenge in the 12th, is that you're simply not getting your needs met. And needs can be physical needs, they can be emotional needs, into any kind of intimacy type needs, like literally, like the list is endless of potential needs that we could have and how we get them met. So it might be an opportunity to be able to meet those. It can also be in the second, skills and talents that you are able to develop. Anything that you could like sell for money, like your cognitive labor, your emotional, your cognitive skills, your emotional skills, your time, like anything that's a resource for you, there might be more of it to give. Okay. So that might be able to help you navigate whatever is going on in the 12th house. Okay. I think that's all I had for them. Let's move on to Taurus rising. So this is going to place Saturn in the 11th house of larger groups, networks, friends, colleagues, any communities you're a part of. It can also be hopes, dreams, and aspirations, you know, the joy of Jupiter up there in the 11th house of good spirits. So what do you aspire to be? What do you dream of? That can be something of the 11th. And then Jupiter is in the 1st house here, helping provide support from your own damn self, I guess. We'll get into that. So things to expect with Saturn going into your 11th. What structures, responsibilities can you bring to your friendships, networks, groups? Jupiter's been in there. And that kind of makes me think that maybe some people, some Taurus rising people, had some ballooning or expansion with their friend groups and networks. And it might be like once Saturn gets in there, it's like, oh my God, this is like a lot of responsibility. Oh my God, this is like a burden. There's so many people in here. It could be that. You also might have had some growth or expansion recently when it came to meeting your aspirations, chasing your hopes and dreams. And now Saturn comes in and says, hey, you got what you wished for. Now it's time to take responsibility for that. So this might not be a bad thing. And this kind of goes for all of the signs. Like, again, if we enter into this Saturn time in Pisces and things are going really well, sometimes we do then have to commit, take responsibility, put in hard work for all of the abundance that's come in to try to like maintain it, basically, which is very different than the letting go. So there's many different options here. But Taurus rising, restructuring, responsibility when it comes to those friend groups or networking, taking responsibility for your dreams and aspirations. If you haven't done that yet, it could be saying, hey, if you really want this, do it. It's time to actually put your work where your dreams are. And in that need for structure in life, we can also say, can we rely on these allies to support us during this time? I don't know what the answer is for that. We can also see stepping into positions of authority in communities, stepping into your experience, taking on responsibility in your community. It can also be delays, challenges, setbacks when it comes to friends, communities, having to limit activity there. Again, if Jupiter was like, we were doing a lot, it could be coming back and saying, actually, no, I can't do this much anymore. And just putting up some healthy boundaries there. There can be disillusionment maybe with some of these things. So maybe on the other hand, you've been going after an aspiration and all of a sudden you're like, oh, actually, this is not what I thought it was going to be, or this is not what I want. And then coming to terms with that, accepting that so you can let it go. Or disillusionment with friend groups, the communities you're part of, networks maybe aren't working out, or it could just be that you've moved on and you're in a different place in life and it just doesn't fit anymore. And so we need to open up and clear that space for new hopes to come in, new aspirations, better fitting communities for us. And then with Jupiter being in the first house, there may be some growth, expansion, opportunity in terms of, just yourself. Like, are you feeling more confident? Are you feeling more optimistic? Maybe you're having the opportunity to express yourself more. Maybe you are the opportunity. Just being yourself and stepping into your selfhood and being able to do that in community is going to be a theme at this time. And that's what I have for Taurus rising. If you are a Gemini rising, you are going to have Saturn in your 10th. So this is going to be maybe a big shift because the 10th house is one of those angular, loud, very prominent places. It's the most public area of the chart in the 10th house. It also has to do with legacy. So there could be themes coming in with that. And we've got Jupiter in your 12th supporting you from there. So that's kind of interesting what Jupiter could be providing for us from the 12th house. So for Gemini rising, there could be delays, challenges, or even just having to work really hard in terms of your 10th house of career and life path. There might be a stepping into a position of authority really publicly. You could be dealing with an authority person in your career. That could be the other side of that coin where it's like, are you the authority or are you running into authority? There could be reaching of limits, having to say no. Maybe you've had, again, just a ton of opportunity previously and you got to cut it off somewhere and be like, yep, these are the most projects that I can do at a time. I have to say no to some of this stuff. Putting up some healthy boundaries, having to deal with a more structured environment in your career, either because you choose to, or it might be imposed on you externally and having to navigate that, taking responsibility or accountability in your public life, your career life, taking responsibility for legacy stuff. It's kind of interesting that Saturn also rules your 8th house And the 8th house really does deal with like debt, but also, insurances like power of attorney, living will, advanced directives, 401ks, retirement, all of those things that honestly, like inheritance. And what is my legacy with that? Like, what am I leaving to my children? That could be a very real thing, especially if you are getting on in years or you're in your like, I think a lot of us start thinking about this stuff in our 30s and our 40s. We're just like, how is all that going to work? I guess I better get a financial advisor or whatever. Or you are at that point of retirement, or, you yourself are like, oh, who is going to be my medical POA? Who is going to be this, and that when we come to needing Hermes as our psychopomp as we go from this life to the next, right? So those could all be things to consider, where it's just like, it's Saturn-tastic. It's kind of heavy, but it is what it is. So legacy concerns. And then we might have disillusionment. Maybe, the career stuff, you've changed, the career has changed, and there's some needing to come to some realistic terms with it. Now, Jupiter in the 12th house can potentially help in terms of, okay, well, maybe this part of my life is a challenge, but maybe my internal landscape, maybe my emotional self, my spiritual self, my mental health self, maybe all that's going really well. And with that, I can support myself. Or there could be a scenario where, if you've got Saturn in the 10th, it's in your public place and you're like, I can't do this anymore. I would like an office with a door that closes. I would like to be in the 12th, more behind the scenes work. Maybe there's an opportunity for you to do more behind the scenes work so that you don't have to be in the public eye as much. I talk to clients where that does happen quite a bit, where, they're just usually in these positions of being public and it gets very exhausting. So maybe there's some behind the scenes work that you can do. And it could be a ceasefire with frenemies or enemies or people you don't get along with. Maybe there's been someone at work that's been difficult and maybe they leave or you're like liberated from them. Maybe there's, an authority person at work that you're not getting along with. And maybe there's some kind of understanding that comes, or forgiveness or peace that comes that helps. It could be liberation from mental bondage or old defeating stories in the 12th, those well-worn neural pathways. Maybe we're growing and expanding out of those mind states that are a bit more difficult. And that's helping us deal with any challenges in the 10th house. And then, I think that was it. I think that was about it. And then too, I guess in that realm of like the 12th house being retreat, going away, kind of away from the busyness of day to day. Maybe if work is hard, you can take a vacation, just throwing it out there. I know some of us are like not doing that enough. So if you have the means, take a vacation. Okay. Now it's time for our beloved Cancer rising, sweet, sweet baby Cancers. So Cancer rising, this puts Saturn in your 9th house and Jupiter in your 11th. And the 9th house is a lot of things. It's kind of complicated like the 3rd. So the 9th house is a place of advanced learning, advanced education, continuing education, certain certificates, university, college stuff, long distance travel. It can also be, like more mainstream religious thought, philosophy, worldview, also astrology. So that's in the 9th. We can get politics, institutions, bureaucracy. So if you're involved in any kind of institutions, having to navigate them. I also see like visas, if you're traveling abroad, like passports, any of those types of documents, or, having to fill out forms for those are things of the 9th house. And then publishing. So if you are sharing things out there in the world, whether it be the written word, a blog, art, whatever you're sharing, that could be published. And even like with the internet now, it's like we're kind of all publishing constantly. It's mass communication. So those are all things. So we could be with Saturn there reaching our limits, having to say no in these areas, having to put up some healthy boundaries when it comes to this. You know, if maybe you ended up like publishing a ton when Jupiter was in there, maybe it's time to cut back because it's unsustainable or something like that. Maybe you just don't want to be that seen or heard, and you would like to cut back on that a little bit. It could be stepping into authority or mastery when it comes to publishing, when it comes to mass communication, you know, stepping into an authority position in like a university or something like that. It could also be running into authority figures in those places that are a pain in the buns. I would recommend, this is maybe a more specific recommendation, but maybe, you know, if you, let me look at the chart here. Yeah, maybe like if you have things to do, forms to fill out when it comes to like visas, passports, stuff like that. If you are a night chart, especially, you might want to get it done before March 7th of 2023. If Saturn is delays, barriers with these areas of life, I would rather do those forms and get those documents all figured out and sorted out before Saturn moves in here. So that is a very specific recommendation for Cancer rising, especially night babies. If you were born with the sun below the horizon in your chart, might want to get that done before Saturn gets in there. Having to deal with a more structured environment in institutions, with publishing, with your mass communication, taking responsibility. It could be a restructuring or a disillusionment with religion, with worldview, with philosophy, a disillusionment with whatever you're sharing in the world, a disillusionment with your education. Like, that's relatable. So, you know, it could be just a coming to reality in a lot of ways. Now, Jupiter in the 11th, what friends, colleagues, groups, or allies can be of service to us in this time? If we're struggling with something in the 9th, maybe we can get a little help from our friends, like literally. If we are mass communicating something, if we want to publish a book, maybe we can drum up support from our wider networks before we do that. And like, so I had a friend, one of my mentors, her name is Lux ATL, and she published a book a few years back, and it was really successful. And part of the reason why is she had built up this beautiful network of people, and we were all just like waiting for her to release this work, you know? So if you can have a nice foundation of friends or allies to support you, that would be great. Maybe within your realm of disillusionment or coming to terms with some things in these areas of the 9th, maybe we're having some opportunities in terms of our deepest aspirations. Maybe our hopes and dreams are at the same time coming to fruition or more possible than ever. So maybe there's something that can give us hope with Jupiter being in the 11th. Yeah, I think that's all I had for that. So let's see here. Leo rising. That's your turn. So now this is Saturn in the 8th, and Jupiter is going to be in your 10th house. So the 8th house, now this is a few different things. That we of course have the bucket with a bucket of topics that have to do with death and death adjacent. You know, this is where if we set up this horizon, this is where planets are setting, right? So as these planets are setting, they're thinking about going to the underworld, right? And it's not this like, you know, hellscape that we have now with like fire and brimstone necessarily, but the ancient idea of the underworld was that it was a place that we didn't really know exactly what was down there. I mean, we kind of did, but it was not something to take lightly. And so I think we get some of these themes of like existential dread, themes of mortality, awareness of mortality, or just like literal death. So I hope that, of course, you know, I guess I have a tendency to maybe value life over death. We can talk about that duality chestnut if that's even you know, appropriate, but hopefully this is nothing sad for you. But it also can be very death adjacent things, like I was mentioning before, with another example, like power of attorney stuff, living will, advanced directives, will and testament, who's getting the inheritance, is this stuff sorted out? If you have siblings, Leo rising, making sure that you and your siblings, you and your extended relatives are all on the same page when it comes to these topics of death in the family and who's getting what. I think the more we can head that off before death is at the door, the more smoothly it all goes. In my own life, in life of friends, I've seen way too much inheritance just tearing families apart. And a lot of it is because we didn't talk about it at all before shit hit the fan. And then by the time people are actually in the dying process, do you think we're all going to be like emotionally ready to handle that? No. So it's much better that I think we talk about things when the waters are a little calmer. So it might be time to take responsibility for that, take accountability for that. It could be for yourself as well. Like, a lot of us who are in our 20s and 30s, we're not thinking about advanced directives. You should do those. It's usually you can Google like any state you're in, just Google your state and then advanced directives or your country. I don't know how it works in other parts of the world. And it gives you this really depressing form that you fill out that's like, this is what I would like to happen when I die. And, or this is the medical care or not that I would like to receive in these very specific circumstances. And then you make a copy of it. You keep a copy. You give a copy to someone important in your family, and you give a copy to your medical provider. Which I'm now realizing I don't think I ever gave mine to my medical provider. It's very depressing to fill out. So just a warning, trigger warning, like it's heavy. But that could be like, honestly, a really constructive use of this 2.5 years is to just sort all of that out. With Jupiter being in your 10th house of career life path, if there's a lot of opportunity that's been happening in terms of your career, if you've been getting some salaries, getting some paychecks, it's time to do the 8th house 401k thing. It's time to do the 8th house diversify portfolio. Maybe it's time to get a financial advisor who is a fiduciary. By the way, they got to be a fiduciary. John Oliver has a really good YouTube video. Just search on YouTube, John Oliver, financial advisor, fiduciary. They talk about some really important things. And I'm not very like financially literate. So it could be a time when all of these complex financial things of the 8th house, where we can get like, someone in authority, Saturn is like that person who's maybe really masterful at navigating these things. We can ask for help for that. P.S. I don't give financial advice. And then taxes, debt, it could be having a reckoning with taxes or debt. So make sure your ducks are in your row in that, or it could be getting your ducks in a row, getting things ordered and sorted out with that. Which again, it could be all because we have a windfall of some kind. We have some opportunity coming in the career that those things go together very well. And remember, this is a sextile, so it could be really helpful. What else? Okay. And then the other thing here. Okay. So partners' resources. That was the other thing. We could be seeing, with Saturn being delays, barriers, setbacks, it could be setbacks in all of those financial things we were talking about. Maybe your investments aren't doing as well during this period of time. I have no idea. I don't want to, scare anyone, but maybe things that you did invest in aren't doing super well, or maybe there's a bit of a delay with those, or your partner's resources. So maybe in terms of their money, your partner's time, their emotional capacity for you, their whatever your partner provides for you. It can be literally anything, and I think people talk about sex a lot with the 8th house. I see sex in the 8th insofar as it is a resource that is seen between partners. That's real. It sounds like shit when I say it out loud, but maybe there's a delay there. Maybe there's a setback there, just with what your partner is able to provide. And it could be because your partner has a ton of responsibility. Your partner is having to take care of a ton of stuff. So that can be a thing. Now, the other thing with the 8th I see a lot is collaboration. So with it being the opposite of the second, we got the 2nd house and the 8th house. And these are places where we exchange resources with other people. We exchange our money, our time, our effort, our skills, our talents, whatever it is. And it could be that they just might not have as much to give in that regard. It could be a lot of, on the other end, it could be that like you have a ton of collaborations, or maybe you're having collaborations that feel more like a burden or a duty or an obligatory type thing. So it could be saying no to some of that. You could be reaching your limit with some of those collaborations with others. Those could all be things. So being honest, I think being, that disillusionment potentially with a partnership, and what you're able to provide them, what they're able to provide you, being really honest about it so that we don't get any weird expectations. Neptune is here, and Neptune, maybe I should have been talking about Neptune the whole time too. I don't know, but Neptune brings in expectations, whether they be rose-colored glasses or cynicism, either way, unrealistic expectations. So the more we can like very realistically be honest, radical honesty, radical acceptance with what we're able to provide for each other, it's just going to make things easier down the road. That reciprocity between the 2nd and the 8th, it's going to be really, really important that there's open communication with that. And then finally, just a little bit more, we kind of talked about Jupiter in the 10th, bringing in some opportunity, some expansion in that 10th house of career and life path of legacy. Maybe we have to deal with that retirement or inheritance stuff because we got money coming in. And it could also just be like, okay, well, maybe, and I feel like I'm going in the opposite direction. It's like, maybe we have a lot of responsibility with collaborations because our work life is like wild and like is very active. It could be that. And, it could be that where are we asking for help? Maybe we're asking for help with some of our collaboration stuff. Maybe we're going to our career. Maybe we're saying, hey, is there anyone up here that I go to work with regularly that can help me out with some of this stuff? I don't know. So I think that was all I could imagine. That was all I could imagine with that. Let's go on to Virgo rising. All right. So we got Saturn in the 7th house of partnership. This one's a little bit more straightforward. This is probably going to be one of the shorter ones just because it is a little bit more straightforward, I think. So partnerships can be romantic. They can be platonic. They can be business partnerships. So consider any of those really important one-on-one relationships that you have in your life. It can also, I see a lot with one-on-one client practice. So for instance, like my astrology practice that I have, 7th house really does speak to my client work. You and I right now are in a 1st, 7th house space, right? It's traditionally, the 1st house and the 7th house were the buyer and the seller and the buyer. So any of these one-on-one things, that is what we want to pay attention to. And then with opportunity or help coming from the 9th house and all of the things that I'll get to with that in a minute. So what might we be seeing with partnership? So I'm going to start with the rosy one first, because I think that's the first thing that comes to mind a lot of times for, the 7th house when we see Saturn going through there is, are we going to get divorced? Are we going to separate? What's happening? What's going on? We get worried because Saturn is, again, delays, barriers, setbacks, saying no, limitations, reaching our limit with partners. But it can also be commitment. It can also be an increase in structure, an increase, and think about what happens when you get married. You're limited. Like, depending on if you're doing monogamy or polyamory or whatever you're doing, like there's some structure here. Even if you've got more than one partner, if you're like more in the polyamory spectrum of things, there's still really like meaningful boundaries that need to be discussed in those relationships. Otherwise, shit gets messy real quick, right? So, Saturn could just be that. It could be that very natural, healthy, normal, commitment, structured, healthy boundary type of container for a partnership to develop. So again, Pisces being this really formless, not a lot of boundaries, not any of this structure. If you have a partnership that's been like that, For better or for worse, maybe it was just a friendship and it's becoming more, or maybe you have a business partner that is a hot mess and a half. And for that business partnership to continue, you need some structure. You need them to be like, on the straight and narrow. So it does not have to be an erosion. And on the contrary, I think, Saturn coming into Pisces, we are trying to avoid erosion of some sort. So just to head that off. Now, that's especially for day babies. If you're a day chart, much more on the end of like the rosy colored, like, oh, we're committing, things are getting serious. Is this serious? Is this not serious? Oh, Saturn's here. It's serious. That can be cool. If you're a night chart, it could still definitely be these things. Although with night charts, I don't want to build up your hopes to just have them squashed. Technically, Saturn is more of a challenge in a night chart. So we could see more of like, there's more of a heavy tone to some of the boundaries that need to be placed. Okay. So I just want to be real about that. Now, some other things that could be happening, just delays, challenges with partnerships, having to put in hard work, delayed gratification with partnerships. When it comes to like the one-on-one client work potential, sometimes what I see with Saturn going through the 7th is when someone is building a practice for themselves and it's all that hard work and like the container again that they're building for that client practice to happen, so, the structure of that. So it could just be constructing that structure, having to say no to things, having to say no to partners. Even like if it's not like a partnership end or anything, it could be saying like, no, I can't do this. I can't do this structure anymore. And if you've been with someone for long enough, like you'll notice that things change, people change over time. And the best partnerships are ones that can have that flexibility built in, especially with Pisces on the 7th. Like, what flexibility can we build in with this structure so that the partnership can continue as we change, as our expectations shift, as our needs shift over time, because needs also change over time, right? So just, yeah, it could just be a switching around, having some like come to Jesus conversations about like, how do we stay together, but make something more flexible or change something, maybe I just can't do the dishes this much anymore and you need to do the dishes. It could be that. It could be, externally speaking, your partner is having the challenges. It could be that the partner is having the difficulties, the slowdowns, the delays. Maybe they are experiencing burden, duty, responsibility. So it could be that thing where the partner steals the transit, so to speak, and then you're having to, because you're the closest person to them, having to hold space for them while they are struggling. So watch out for that as well. Then we can see, well, kind of in what I've said, disillusionment, anytime we're like, oh yeah, this shit's not working. How do we fix it? Taking responsibility for these things. And then, was that it? Was that pretty much it? Oh yeah, last thing I wanted to say about this. So couples counseling. Wow, what a thought. Do it. Like, I think in this world, we are getting more and more and more comfortable with our own personal therapist, with our own personal, like, yeah, I got a therapist. It's cool. We talk about it online. Everyone's cool with it now. Depending on where you are in the world. I don't think we're there with couples counseling. Like, people are still so resistant to getting a professional to help mediate or navigate challenges in relationship. Think about how difficult it is to navigate our own internal challenges. And now think about how difficult it is for two people to have to do that together. We need professional help sometimes. So don't be afraid during this Saturn period of time to do it early and often. It's like going to the doctor too. You don't want to wait until you're bleeding out to go to the urgent care. You want to actually get annual or biannual checkups to make sure that things are going well. Actually, I'm going to add some more resources I just thought of. I should make a note. I'm going to make a note. Hold, please. Where's my things? I'll have to write it here. I've got some really cool resources for struggles in partnership that I'm going to link below. One of them is about basically how to like communicate and like rebuild that communication, coming back to communication in partnership. So I'm going to link some below. Link special resources. And I highly recommend, there's like a 50-minute podcast that delineates it. And I think it'll be helpful. It just is, it's a framework for communicating through challenges basically with partners. And it's like, I use the framework all the time in any difficult conversation I'm having. So that might be of service. So Virgo rising, go look below and I'll like title it relationship resource or whatever. And then where can we look for help? So Jupiter is going to be in your 9th house. This is that piece of like the advanced learning, the continuing education. Maybe you're getting resources, new learning something from far away. You know, it's far away places. Maybe the teacher, the mentor, the spiritual person of Jupiter is from a far away place. And actually the resource thing that I'm going to send you, I got it from Plum Village, which is like Thich Nhat Hanh's thing. So maybe this will be it. It can be helpful. So things like this, where we're going maybe out of our familiar range of knowledge to try to gather some information to try to help us navigate whatever is going on in the partnership place. We can also see, you know, maybe a vacation is in order. Maybe we need to go on a darn vacation with our love, with our, I don't know, maybe that would help a business partnership too. I have no idea, but maybe just going away, enjoying yourself, indulging, you know, in Taurus, fucking enjoying yourselves. Like that can really enliven and invigorate a dull relationship, you know, or just getting away from, you know, Saturn ruling the 6th, Saturn ruling the 5th, the responsibility, the heaviness, the weight of daily living. Maybe we can just go away for a week and remember what it's like to just be with each other. Like that could totally be a thing. And this is actually making me realize too, you know, perhaps the reason why there's struggle in the partnership, it could be the partner having health challenges. It could be that they break their arm and you have to wash all the dishes. It could be that mundane, you know, it could be child rearing, you know, just parenting and the commitment of the partnership that needs to kind of up level because of children, or just that, you know, it's just more difficult from what I hear, you know, parenting and then also navigating relationship stuff. It's a challenge. So it could be those very normal things that happen in life over the course of most people's lives that are really coming up now at this point. And then just like with the 9th house with Jupiter being in there, opportunity, expansion. Maybe there is a change in the heart mind, you know, changing your views, changing, you know, Taurus doesn't really want to change and Uranus is up there. And there's been a lot of change asked of Taurus in the worldview philosophy department for a while now. And so literally changing your mind about some things, opening your mind to some things might be helpful for the partnership. And then the final possibility I was imagining was like mass communications. If it's a business partnership thing, it could be like there's some opportunity in terms of advertising, an opportunity in advanced education, getting a certificate of some kind, expanding your skill set that might help the business partnership. So it could be something like that that's coming up. Okay, Libra, it's your turn. Libra rising. This puts Saturn in your 6th and Jupiter in your 8th house. And this is the 6th house. You know, I kind of mentioned before a couple times, I used you as an example, the 6th house being health, wellness, disease, recovery from disease. It's our daily routines, our daily maintenance. It's pets, you know, anyone we're taking care of on a daily basis. The 6th house is obligation and duty itself. So, you know, taking care of your own body, taking care of pets. If you're a caregiver and you have to take care of anybody, that can be very 6th house. 6th house also just being like money-making work, bill-paying jobs, survival work, you know, toiling, it's toiling. And do we choose to toil? Well, then it's service maybe. So if you are in the service kind of work where you are, you know, giving back in some way, This could be that as well. Now, Saturn coming in here could be taking on more responsibility with that, having more burden. It could be stepping into a position of authority. It could be you becoming the manager. It could also be, you know, in that space of bill paying work, this hierarchy of boss, manager, and employee. It could be like having a boss that is coming down hard on you, or some kind of difficulty with authority in those workplaces. It could be having a come to Jesus moment with your health, having to really step up and make more structure when it comes to your daily maintenance, your daily health, your routines. And it could also be commitment to those things. We're committing to a new health routine. Maybe we're going to get a pet and we're committing to overhauling the structure of our daily living, because now we have to do 1 to 2 walkies a day, right? Hopefully 2 walkies. And like, you know, it changes your whole life if you get a pet. So all of those things could be the case. If we can prepare for them before March, fantastic. A really specific example for Libra rising, Saturn is the bones. So especially if you're an estrogen dominant person, where our bone health is more of an issue, statistically speaking, this might be a really great opportunity to start weight-bearing exercises. If your doctor approves, or if your main medical person who you're in contact with, if they say this is okay, talk to them about it. Weightlifting, weight-bearing activities, anything we can get where the muscle is pulling on the bone, that's going to strengthen that bone. And Pisces, not a lot of structure here. So we want to fortify, you know, fortify as best we can. And this can be this 2.5-year period of starting those practices so that we can avoid osteoporosis, osteopenia. We want to avoid these things. Now we can also see, you know, if you do have any setbacks, delays with challenges with your health, it could just be, you know, again, that hard work of dealing with that and the burden of dealing with health issues. And hopefully, you know, this is a hopefully thing. It's a temporary transit. So any issues, I would hope wouldn't be forever. But of course, we don't know that. We don't know enough to say that. But and this also is very dependent on what we are coming into this period of time with. If you're coming into Saturn in Pisces, healthy as a horse, that's one thing. If you're not, then that's another thing. If you're a day baby versus a night baby, this could vary wildly. So again, it could be a serious health challenge. It could also just be like, yeah, I'm going to start going to the gym. So, and then just making sure whatever structures you are making in the 6th, that they are flexible enough that you're not setting yourself up for failure. Again, Pisces doesn't love structure. It likes to have more of a cyclical thing. You know, if we think about the oceans, Jason Hawley is the first person I heard mention this. You know, water signs, they're more cyclic in nature. We don't like these geometric, linear, you know, constantly the same types of structures. We like the ability to move around. We like to be able to say, I don't feel like doing this today, but I know I have to do it twice this week and I get to choose when, you know. So giving ourselves some flexibility so that we set ourselves up for success. That is going to be the name of the game. And in that cyclical structure too, another idea I had, you know, just the work smarter, not harder, meal prepping. So I'm only having to cook once a week or twice a week. And then I just freeze stuff. Like I make smoothies once a week and then I just freeze a shit ton of them. And then I just thaw them out all week as I need. And it's like the best. Now you need a good blender. So it might be time to invest in a blender. Let's see. And then opportunity in the 8th. So maybe we can ask partners for help. You know, maybe our partners are really having like the time, the effort, the emotional, cognitive capacity, money, whatever it is, to help us with Libra rising, help us with any of these challenges we're having. Maybe it's like, I am so overburdened every day that all these little 6th house tasks, like I got to water the plants and I have to wash the floor and I have to do this and that. Maybe we can ask our partners for help. Right? Or maybe we can collaborate if we're having a challenge in the 6th house of daily, just our daily work, our daily job that we have to report to every day. Maybe there are some collaborations at work where we can get a lift up or a boon of some kind. So don't be afraid to ask for help. I know Libra, you don't always want to ruffle the feathers. You want to make sure everybody is happy and safe and all that. And sometimes that can manifest as not asking for help when we need it. So this is not the 2 years to be doing that, 2.5 years. It is time to ask for help if you need it. Oh, and this could also be insurance, like these pooled resources of the 8th. Sometimes we see insurance. So if you do have health issues, look for opportunities in terms of health coverage. Look for opportunities in terms of, I don't know, any kind of help there. And then this is maybe, I don't know what you would call this, but the 8th house is also occult topics, esoteric topics. Maybe the tarot has some advice for you. Like maybe you can do some occult esoteric studies and somehow that will help you. This is the people that are the 12th from the 9th. They're not the mainstream religious people. They're the other people that aren't mainstream. So maybe they have something that can help you with any challenges that you're having in the 6th house if you're looking for help. All right, Scorpio rising. I'm really glad I started this as early as I did. We're going to be here all day. And I mean that in the best way possible. Okay. If y'all can all handle the increasing vocal fry. Okay. So Scorpio rising, you are going to have Saturn in your 5th house. And we're going to have help, expansion, opportunity, Jupiter in the 7th. So the 5th house being about children, relationships with children, childcare. It can be our creative expression of self. It's the recreation of self. So whether we're recreating ourselves in terms of babies, recreating ourselves in terms of our arts or our projects, even if it's not watercolors, like literally anything you're creating is in the 5th. Your creative processes. How are you creating stuff? Rest, rejuvenation, romance, casual dating, sex, your sex life, your sexuality. What else? I think that's it, right? So we can see, some maybe delays, barriers, challenges when it comes to these topics. Maybe the child rearing is taking a lot of your responsibility, a lot of your time to handle it. Maybe we're trying to create structures in terms of raising children that we're having to really focus on and give a lot of attention to. And that's, maybe making rest difficult. At the same time, you might be asked to take responsibility for your rest. Are you resting enough? Are you doing the things that are rejuvenating? Are you creating a container and a structure for your creative processes? If you're an artist, especially, and maybe your creative process has just been like all over the place, maybe it's time to tighten it up and figure out what really works. If you are creative of some kind and you do that for your work, maybe you get hired with a company and they are now restricting and demanding that you create certain things in a certain way. That can be really limiting and really annoying depending on who you are. It can be cool though, too, if you're into that. So it really depends on what you're into. And it could also be taking responsibility or even like having delays or challenges when it comes to dating. So if the dating sphere, I don't want to scare anybody because it could be commitment too. It could either be, okay, we're really taking responsibility for this. I'm going to make the Tinder account. I'm going to do the things that are needed, delayed gratification to find a romantic partner. On the other hand, it could also be delays with this, challenges with this. So if you're finding that over the next couple years, 3 years, that the dating stuff has been a bit slow, or you've been in kind of a restructuring process with that, that's fine. It might not be that you're doing anything wrong. It just might be that things are slow in that area right now. And perhaps once Saturn gets out in 2025, or gets away from your stuff, if Saturn is moving toward your planets versus away from your planets, things should improve as Saturn moves away from your planets or points that you might have in the 5th house. I think that's it. It could just be, rest being hard, difficulty finding rest, difficulty finding those things that are rejuvenating for you. And then if we want to ask for help, we might look to Jupiter. in the 7th. What can our partners do? If we're finding childcare or something like that really burdensome, maybe our partner is awesome and can really help us with that. Or there's like some learning or teaching or something that is available through partnership that can help with any challenges in the 5th. Maybe we are learning about our partnership. Maybe there's a lot of goodwill happening between us and our partner that can be of assistance if there are like sexual challenges in the relationship. Maybe this could be another couples counselor type thing. If you are a Scorpio rising, it might be time to do the couples counseling, right? This Jupiter could be a teacher or some kind of person who knows things about partnership that could potentially help you. So also for Scorpio rising, I put a resource below about communicating through difficult topics with partners and things. I'm going to put that below as like a relationship resource. So I want you to look at that too if you're interested. It's like a 50-minute podcast that I got from it's Thich Nhat Hanh's YouTube channel, basically. It's just a way to frame conversations to move through these things. That might be really helpful. What else? Yeah, I think that's all I can think of there. And I guess in like the creativity kind of like creative process department too, if you do have like a partner in collaboration with your arts or with your creations, it might be that that partner has a lot of help or ideas for you in what you can do or what you can create at this time. So Sagittarius rising. This is going to put Saturn in your 4th house of home, parents, dwelling, wherever you live, your origins, the land that you are on, or just land in general, real estate. This can be your private life, ancestry. So, parents, grandparents onward. And yeah, those are basically the topics. Sometimes I like to put in like conditioning of some kind, like, if we think about like where we grew up, where we came from, our origins, all that stuff affects us for like ever. So any of like your deep conditioning from your upbringing, like I think that can be 4th house too, but that's a little bit more abstract. And we might be seeing some challenges, some issues with that. So maybe our parent relationships end up with some challenges. The 4th house sometimes does come in with like the end of the matter. Can be the issue. Or like from Demetra George, she talks about how in the 4th house in the home, in some ancient Greek time or something, in the foyer, in the entryway of the homes, they had a space that was made to basically have like the wake at a funeral for people to come in and say their last goodbyes before the burial or whatever. So like the end of the matter in that term. Sometimes we do see some deathy types of things come in. So again, I hope that's not it for you. But just to keep that in mind, that Saturn can bring some of these things on its own. The 4th house can be some of these things. I don't expect there to be that, but that is one of the 4th house definitions. But even like the end of the matter, I mean, in terms of like making a real estate deal, a land deal, how is it going to turn out? How is it going to end? That can be kind of an abstract thing with the 4th. So Saturn coming in, delays with that, challenges with that, loss with that. It might, especially if you're a night chart, I don't know how great it's going to be to try to find a home during this time. It might be difficult. I'm not saying you can't, I'm not saying you shouldn't, but just know, like, if you're trying to close a deal on your home, if you're trying to sell your home, it might not go as quickly. Saturn is slow. So just watching out for that. Parent relationships might become more difficult or might require more attention, more responsibility. If Saturn is duty and obligation, it could be having to go home, having to be in your home for some reason, because you are needed there to help. It could be just difficulties in your private life in terms of feeling more restricted, feeling limited, not necessarily getting your needs met in terms of your dwelling as much as or as easily as you were used to. And it could also be taking on more of the positive side, taking responsibility for these things. Maybe if your home hasn't been how you want it, and if you have the resources, going out and finding the dwelling that fits for you, or creating a space for yourself, creating a container for your private life that really helps and fits with what you need. And then we can see Jupiter in the 6th. What kind of opportunities are we getting in that? Maybe your health is doing just great. Maybe you are fit and vigorous and ready to take on the world, and that is of service to you in this moment. Or maybe we can get help or clues from like the people that we work with at our daily money making job. Maybe they've got some clues as to where we could find some real estate. If you have pets, if you have little furry buddies, maybe they could help in making a home life that feels good to you. So much our animal companions, our non-human friends, are such an integral part of our private life that they really make a house a home. So it could be, maybe we're going to get opportunities to have furry friends come into our life to help lift up some of the heaviness or the burdens in our 4th house. And it could go the other way around. Like, maybe we get a pet and it's like, oh, I have to restructure. I have to kitten proof my home. I have to make sure that like this animal isn't going to like destroy my furniture. It could be that as well. It could be all of that. Let's see. What else did I say? Disillusionment with your 4th house. So maybe you figure out that parent relationships aren't what you thought they were. Maybe, well, that's a pretty common experience in life. I think a lot of us at some point in our life, we get a really realistic perspective on our relationships with our parents, maybe, or even just like our origins, our ancestry, like what challenges have we had in our lineage that really define who we are. There's so much depending on where you come from, so much challenge and so much struggle in the lineage that really reflects and weighs on us. There was just recently a astrology podcast episode where they talked about intergenerational, I think that's the word that they used, intergenerational healing or something like that. And this concept of epigenetics, where like our genes are basically, our genetic expression is affected by the amount of stress that our parents, our grandparents, so on and so forth experienced. And that goes down the line to us. So it could be feeling the burden, the delays, the challenges that have been caused from literal intergenerational trauma. So maybe we can say that for Sagittarius rising, maybe in healing that, in working with that, we can actually focus on our health, focus on our wellness. Maybe my parents had it really hard and they were stressed the fuck out, and then that affected my genetic expression down the line. So now it's my responsibility to take care of myself. And maybe I have the resources health-wise to do that. And maybe I'm learning about my health. Maybe I'm understanding more about how to take care of myself in a way that helps to remedy, I guess remedy is not the right word, but helps to support what is the realistic body and meat suit that I have now, that I inherited from my lineage. So it could be something like that. Yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah. And I mean, I guess just in like the really vague private lifey thing, if your private life is kind of a mess, if your private life is not going well, if there's not a lot of structure there, again, Pisces is kind of formless or shapeless, and we want to bring structure, bring kind of a nice container for our daily private life so we can have a good foundation, a supportive home base to do the rest of our life from. Maybe we have opportunity in that 6th house of daily routines. Taurus does like a routine. Taurus does like doing the same shit every day. So maybe Jupiter is there being like, here's the same stuff you want to do every day to help support your private life. This is the food that you need to eat to feel really supported in your private home. Yeah, it could be all of that. So it sounds like there's a lot of, that was a really wide spectrum of things that could be happening. That was kind of all over the place, but that's what you get. Okay. Capricorn. Capricorn rising. So this places Saturn in your 3rd house. This also places Jupiter in your 5th. So now we might be having delays, barriers, challenges in terms of learning something new. Or maybe there's a learning curve in your life right now that just takes a lot of effort and a lot of effort over a long period of time. And that's okay. That happens sometimes, right? No matter what age you are, if you are changing your business model and you have to pivot and you have to learn something new, that happens. So whatever new things, foundational things you're learning, it might just take quite a bit of elbow grease over like a 2.5 year of time. It could be challenges coming up with siblings, extended relatives, maybe an extended relative somehow gets injured and you have to help them or something like that, burden, responsibility, something like that in terms of those people. Maybe you're coming into a position of authority when it comes to the people that you see regularly. In the 3rd house, we see those people that we work with regularly, speak with regularly. And maybe we are coming into a place like of, I guess, mastery with those people. They're seeing us as an authority. They're seeing us as someone who has experience because, Saturn is you. That's going to be interesting about Capricorn and Aquarius rising, is that these are the 2 signs of the zodiac where Saturn actually represents you as a person. So it could be you coming and being like, yeah, I know about this stuff. And then serving in that regard in your community that is local. It could be having some limitations in terms of what is local. Maybe your favorite bakery closes down. Womp womp. It could be something like that. It could just be that you're more constricted or limited in what is available to you locally, or what was familiar was taken away and you have to find new familiar things that you like. It could be disillusionment with like these people, these places, these things that are more regular, local, familiar. It could be that we are learning new things and maybe seeing the reality of the matter. It could be having to take responsibility for our regular communications. Maybe there's just a lot of communicating that you're doing, and there's a lot of emails, and there's a lot of all that, and it is a lot of work. That could be it. Having to deal with different structures in these areas, whether they are ones that you put in place or whether they are imposed externally. Could be a lot of responsibility with short distance travel. Like say if you're having to do a ton of errands all the time, could be something like that. And when it comes to like daily rituals, I like to think about the 3rd house, the place of goddess, the place of priestess. What regular rituals are we doing every day or every week that are supportive, that feel like they're helping us structure and punctuate each day? And it might be time to build a container or build a structure for that, create some form in terms of these little rituals that might be really helpful or enlivening for you. And when we look at where we could get help, I mean, very plainly, like, what do you enjoy? What actually brings you pleasure? If we're thinking about ritual, especially, like, it's time to get the nice candles. Like, it's time to get, if I'm lighting my moon candle on Monday and my Mars candle on Tuesday, in Taurus, it's like, I'm very like kind of aware of the senses that are involved in these processes. What smells do I like? What sights do I like? What fabric do I like? These things are all very important, and they might actually be able to somehow help if we are embracing, rest, rejuvenation. It might make all of this communication and all of this responsibility a lot easier to take on if we're actually taking the time to rest, if we're taking the time to take care of ourselves. We could also see opportunity coming in the form of romance, sexual relationships. I'm not really sure how that fits in, but there's opportunity there. Maybe if communication has been all over the place, it's kind of hard to start relationships with people if the communication is not online. If the communication is nebulous, shapeless, changeable, 1 minute you're talking to someone, the next minute you're not. If you can tighten that up, that might help you meet the opportunities for romantic relationships that might have been challenging otherwise. Yeah, that works. We'll go with that. Self-expression. So that's the other thing too, like in the third house being communication, if we are having to really step into communication more, or even like maybe less, maybe we're saying no to some of these people, places, and things, saying no to all of the extended relatives. Like, I can't do this anymore. I can't talk to you all the time. Or maybe you're saying no in terms of a way that you have been communicating. Jupiter in the fifth is like, well, how do I want to express myself? What kinds of creativity do I want to be communicating? Maybe in saying no to some things in the third house, we can say yes to some things in the fifth. Maybe if we're doing less in the third house, maybe all of these errands that we're running, all of this traveling that we're doing, all of these emails that we're writing, if we can somehow lessen that, maybe we will have more time for creativity, self-expression, our relationship with our children, romance, any of those things. So could be that saying no is what we need to take advantage of the opportunities in the fifth, or the opportunities in the fifth can really be expressed by restructuring how we are communicating or what we're learning in the third house. All right. And then finally, we did it. Aquarius rising. Okay. So I was kind of alluding to this when I began about, I was using myself as an example. So Aquarius rising, we're going to have, I'm going to say we, because it's me too, Saturn going into the second house. And this is our place of money, finances, our needs, what needs are being met or not. It is our values, what we value more abstractly. It is our talents and our skills that we have to offer. So literally anything we can offer is a resource, right? And that can be, again, our skills and talents that we might sell for money. So with Saturn coming in here, Saturn could be delays or challenges with that. Maybe my bank account is struggling. Maybe I'm having to put in a lot of work that is just a slog when it comes to bringing in resources, making that material foundation for myself. Maybe I'm having to take on a lot of responsibility for this area. If I maybe haven't had a really solid structure when it comes to making money and making funds, maybe now Saturn is coming in saying, actually, it's probably time that you take responsibility for this area. Like we don't just wait for money to fall into our lap. We actually go out, create it, make it, all of that. It could be making more form and structure in how we manage our money. So like if you don't have like a spreadsheet or something like that for your finances, Saturn coming into your second house might be a really good time to do that. So I started, keeping track of my books, and I fill them out, but I could probably do it more regularly, more consistently, instead of like, just spending 4 hours on it once every quarter. I could update it monthly or something like that. So bringing more discipline into this area. It could be more discipline in spending. What did Valens call Pisces? The spendthrift. So it might be having to cut back on some spending, tightening the belt, as they say. Now, if this place is fine, if you're coming into this period of time in March of 2023 and your bank account is doing fantastic, it might be time to level up. It might be time to say, okay, how am I structuring my finances so that we can keep building upon this somehow? When it comes to needs, taking responsibility for getting your needs met, some of this is out of our control. We don't live in a society currently, at least where I'm from, that really supports people getting all of their holistic needs met. We kind of tell people to just fuck off, basically. And so I get that it's not like saying, oh, get your needs met. That is a big easier said than done. And that is deeply complicated. But if there are things that you can do to try to have your needs met, do it. Do whatever it is. Do the hard work and the discipline that it takes to do that. With great freedom comes great responsibility. With taking responsibility usually leads to some kind of freedom. So that can be what is playing here. What else? So having to say no to things, having to say maybe with the talents, the skills, the development of skills, we might have to really put in discipline or effort when it comes to that. It could be a construction period of time when it comes to developing new skills or talents. It could be, taking accountability for those things. Like, maybe I do have this ability, maybe I could offer this up, but I just haven't for some reason. And it's time to actually step into that authority, step into that experience of offering whatever it is that you have to offer. And then finally, it could be disillusionment. Maybe we're having a realistic, like, come to Jesus talk when it comes to money, when it comes to needs, when it comes to our skills, and saying, okay, I could actually do a lot better here. So how am I going to do that? When it comes to Jupiter and how that could help us, we see Jupiter in the 4th house. Maybe there's something that has to do with our parent relationships. Maybe parents can bail us out. Maybe they have something to offer. Maybe in our home, in our dwelling, we can have a really supportive space to work from. So maybe the bank account isn't going great, but I know that I have a home base that I can come back to every day to just keep working and keep managing it. Maybe I can get just emotional support from my family. Maybe I can get emotional or financial support, even, because Jupiter rules the 2nd house here, from my origins, the people of my origins. Maybe there's an opportunity in land. If you are doing really well here in the 2nd and you're coming in, maybe there's an opportunity to put that into some kind of land investment of some kind, or real estate. Maybe we can upgrade the dwelling to make us feel more supported in some way. And I think was there any other ideas that I had with that? When it comes to getting needs met, I guess, one thing could be said in the private life, so it's the opposite from the 10th. The 10th is very public. The 4th house is very private. Is there any opportunities, any growth or expansion that can happen privately that can somehow help us get our needs met in some way? Even when it comes to just like working and making money, maybe an opportunity comes. Maybe we're having a hard time in this capitalistic hellscape. Like, maybe making money is just so difficult for us, but all of a sudden we get an opportunity to work from home, and that is doable and that is accessible to us. There might be some kind of opportunity coming in while Jupiter is in Taurus to allow us to work from home, that, or just like somehow privately getting our needs met such that it helps us feel like we have that foundation of support in the 2nd. So that is what I think about Aquarius rising. And that's everybody, because we did Pisces first. So, wow, that was a whole event. I didn't know that would take, I kind of knew it would take this long, but sorry if you wanted a short thing. I never do. Like, even when I was like a little kid, I would try to make like an art project. I'm like the master of project creep. Like, I would set down like some kind of art project, and it would end up taking me like a month instead of like a few days, because I'd like get into so much detail with it, and then pretty soon I'm like, wow, this is like I'm really in deep on this. And I keep seeing it like I've been doing this my whole life. So I don't think I'm going to be one of those short form astrologers. We're long form. I think I like the long form type thing. Hopefully you found that helpful. I'm going to stop sharing. Hopefully that was of some service. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please hit the like button, smash the subscribe button. You can comment below if any of this resonated. If you want to share, if you're comfortable sharing any examples from your life that you kind of see coming down the pipe, that you see the trajectories happening, you can feel free to share that below in the comments. I always like reading those. Announcements. Do I have any announcements? What are they? I'm still doing research, so I'm still trying to find people to help me to get examples for this technique called the Moon Under Bond. And it's like my cheapest reading right now. It's $45 for 45 minutes. The technique only takes like 15, 20 usually to go over. And then we just spend the rest of the time, talking about the moon or just whatever else you want. So that's a really good option if you're like super tight on money. Otherwise, I do have a sliding scale. So if you are looking for astrology astrological guidance and you're someone who is either struggling with money, has been disenfranchised, is a victim of oppression, which I know there's like a lot of people who are a victim of oppression in this society, please reach out by email. You can email me at aligninglighastro@gmail.com and we can just set it up manually like that. Otherwise, I have a newsletter. I'm about to write my next one and send that out for the winter solstice coming up. So you can go to my website, www.aligninglightastrology.com, sign up for the newsletter. I send out one a month. That's it. And it has all of my events. Usually there's some kind of discount code. And it's just kind of the one-stop shop for everything. And then I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter, Claire Moon Astro. I'm on Instagram as Aligning Light Astrology. I'm not really on Facebook. I hate Facebook. And my books are open, you know, get a reading. That's actually the best way to keep me in business is to get a reading. And that you can book again at www.aligninglightastrology.com. I'm really only booked out like 2 weeks, maybe 3 right now, which is crazy. Like that never happens. I'm usually only booked out like a week. So usually if you need to get in quick, I can do that. But I think that's it. Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for, if you like listen to the whole intro, thank you. And again, if you are looking for some kind of extra support, I put down some of my favorite resources that I felt like were relevant for this period of time. And again, just overall, Saturn and Pisces. Pisces is such a soft land. It's a very soft and sensitive place. And when I say sensitive, I don't just mean like emotionally sensitive. I also mean just like all of the other senses too. So during this Saturn time, when Saturn is coming in as like the hard parent, just be nice to yourself. Be kind. Start that practice right now. Don't even wait until Saturn gets in there. Just start that practice right now of taking care of yourself, emotionally being kind to yourself, because that hypercriticism can come in with Saturn. And so if we can be like, yep, that is real. And also it's okay that I'm not perfect. Yep, I need to improve that, or that could use some work, but that doesn't mean that I'm a bad person or something like that. Like these phrases that we can keep coming back to that really remind us that we are worthy of love, acceptance, no matter what is going on. Okay. All right. I love you all. Thank you so much. Bye.